Okay, welcome everyone to tonight's event, Building Customer Information Experiences for Seamless Transit. Welcome everyone to our event, Building Customer Information Experiences for Seamless Transit. My name is Liz Brookhouse and I'm a board member with Seamless Bay Area. For those who don't know us, we are a nonprofit advocating for a more unified, equitable and thriving transit system across the entire Bay Area. We are co-hosting tonight with our friends from San Francisco Transit Riders and Streets for People, two organizations also fighting for great customer information experiences and more sustainable transportation across the Bay Area region. But I will share some of my background and why I'm excited to present today. So I'm a designer and I've previously done work on customer information for transit riders at the MBTA in Boston. So I'm keenly aware of how technology can advance the quality of the rider experience. Done well, I think it feels like the agency is really there for you, like a friend guiding you along every step of your journey. And I'm pleased to be joined by our panelists who have also had similar experience building technology to deliver great customer information experiences from across the United States. So today our panelists are Jason Lee, who is the program manager for the customer information system at the SFMTA. And he's responsible for delivering Muni's next generation of real-time transit information. And he has some really cool work to share. Prior to the SFMTA, he served in the President's Office of the Chicago Transit Authority and in the planning department at BART. Our second presenter tonight will be Will Fisher, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for the Long Island Railroad and the operating division of the MTA in New York City. Will has been at the forefront of transforming the railroad's customer information experiences. So we're in for a great show tonight, learning about how we got that done. And finally, Dave Maltzon is a product manager at Swiftly. And in his previous role, he ran the Boston MBTA's Rapid Transit Real-Time project, which was rethinking and rebuilding the real-time arrivals system for a huge and complex network over in Boston. And he now helps Swiftly design and deliver its transit data platform, which provides real-time operations and rider information to over 100 cities. And the flow for tonight is we will have our panelists present for 10 minutes each. And after that, we'll have a Q&A. So you'll have the chance to ask questions of each of the panelists. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to add your questions and we'll see how many we can get to. And with that, thank you all for joining and let's get started. So we've asked each of our panelists to share some of their past and present work, offer lessons learned, and reflect on building large and complex systems in large organizations and regions, just like the Bay Area. So once they've each spoken, we'll open up to questions. So if Jason is ready, let's get started with the home team. Jason, would you like to take it away?
Okay. Let's see. Okay. I think I have it right now. Did it come up?
Yep.
Great. So first, thank you, Liz, and thank you to Seamless Bay Area, SF Transit Riders, and Streets for People for hosting this. Jason Lee, Program Manager for our Next Generation Customer Information System at the SFMTA. So tonight we're going to be talking, giving a project overview and benefits. We'll be talking about project milestones, what we're doing to improve predictions quality. We're going to give everyone a preview of the new signage, as well as of the Muni mobile app, our revamped mobile app that will feature both mobile ticketing and a trip planner. So just as background, what is our next generation customer information system? Well, back in 2000, we were the first major US transit system to implement real-time information with our NextBus system. Obviously, since then, there have been a lot of advancements in technology and also transportation driven by technology. With that, we embarked on a complete refresh of our NextBus system back in 2017. At that time, we conducted an extensive public outreach effort, which shaped the features and functionality of the new system. That included a comprehensive multilingual survey with over 5,800 responses, concept testing, and ride-along interviews with customers. So what were some from our outreach? Well, first and foremost, that real-time information at the right times and places has the potential to increase transit ridership across all demographics. This was perhaps the most exciting takeaway from our research. We found that in some cases, even socioeconomic differences in the way that people rode public transportation all but disappeared with the appropriate real-time information being shown. So that was great. Also, our customers really wanted improved prediction accuracy. And then they wanted to keep informed throughout their journey, particularly with respect to service disruptions and transfers. They wanted us to leverage mobile technology much better and then offer alternatives and other supplementary information. So given that, we really looked at re-architecting the way that we produce customer information. So this is a very high-level diagram of the way that the new customer information system is structured. We have a bunch of inputs that are shown here at the top in gray. We've got GPS locations of our surface bus and rail vehicles. We have information from our automatic train control system for rail vehicles underground, and then also APCs. We also have a variety of other information that comes in real time. That information all gets fed into system software, and then the system software is really the brains of the system. It produces customer information and predictions and pushes that information out to a variety of customer-facing interfaces, including stationary digital signs that you see at shelters and stops and stations, onboard digital signs that you're now starting to see on board our battery electric bus pilot vehicles, and then through our mobile platform and website. And then all this information then gets, the system generates a whole bunch of data and information that gets fed into an analytics platform, which will help us better understand customer travel patterns and desires, and then we can improve our service and operational plan. So what are some of the benefits of the new CIS? One, we're going to improve service awareness. We know about rapidly changing transit service plans as we witnessed during COVID. We're going to be able to show dynamic maps with vehicle locations, show nearby alternative routes. So if a vehicle isn't coming for a while, people can take a different route to get to where they're going. And then very importantly for this group, promoting seamless regional connectivity by displaying predictions for partner transit agencies. Improving the customer experience, we'll be able to convey information about vehicle crowding. We're going to implement double-sided signs at shelters at the third of our most popular shelters to allow customers to view information from a distance outside the shelter. And this was really something that SF Transit riders had strongly advocated for. So we're very happy to be able to deliver that. And also to be able to communicate alerts and public safety announcements in multiple languages. And then more responsive planning. We will be able to have customer survey and incident reporting in our new app. The analytics platform, as I mentioned, to monitor ridership patterns and to determine how we're going to improve service. And then some operational benefits through providing an app that our operations folks can use to manage service better on the streets. So where we are in the project, we've done a lot of work. leading up to last year when we got the MTA board to approve our contract, and then our board, the board of supervisors to approve our contract at the beginning of the pandemic. We then spent time doing detailed project design throughout 2021. And then we're at the stage right now where we're coming back to the public, connecting back and showing what we have and receiving input on what we've designed so far. We're going to be then we're in the process of upgrading signs and aiming for a launch of the CIS system and mobile app later in the year, with system enhancements to come in the following year. So we heard a lot through our public outreach about improving predictions quality. We are focusing on more accurate vehicle arrival predictions, fewer ghost buses, improved terminal departure predictions, and real-time service detours and delays. We're going to be able to show vehicle locations, vehicle occupancy, and in the future, transfer connection predictions, alternative routes, more information about accessible services, regional transit connections, and multilingual public announcements. So speaking of accessibility, we were really focused on this very important component throughout our program, making sure we provide accessible information for stops and vehicles, elevator and escalator outages. The design of our signs are going to be much friendlier for everyone, including people with disabilities, with larger text, more contrast in the way text is displayed, and push-to-talk functionality. And then onboard digital signage, we're going to have, this is a future enhancement, accessible information for upcoming transit stops and connecting routes. And then the mobile platform and website, we'll talk about this more later in the presentation. Trip planner, the trip planner, which will accommodate accessibility preferences. So this is what our shelter sign is going to look like. This is a mock-up of what you'll see in the shelter starting in a couple months, the route, the destination of the sign, the destination of the route, and then the number of minutes when the vehicle is expected to arrive. You could see here that unlike our current signs, we can display multiple routes, 2 routes at one time. So there's more real estate there. And then we're also aiming as a future enhancement to show vehicle locations on the map. So you could see here where the person is standing and then the arriving vehicles in 4 minutes and 16 minutes. So people have greater confidence in the reliability of the predictions. We will also be able to have larger space for message alerts. So less scrolling, and then also to be able to support different languages, which use, for example, characters in Chinese or accents in Spanish. Let's see. We will also be using push-to-talk buttons. We'll be leveraging our existing push-to-talk buttons, and in new locations, we will be adding push-to-talk buttons. Let's see here. And then now we'll talk about our Muni mobile app. We currently have a Muni mobile app which does mobile ticketing primarily. We are upgrading this to include trip planning. We will be incorporating accessibility guidelines that are consistent with ADA, which will improve the utilization for people with disabilities of our system. Some of the features you could see here, we have mobile ticketing, the trip planner, accessible itineraries, arrival times. We have some functionality right now through an embedded link to Google Maps, but we're really going to improve upon that and really be able to provide more reliable information through our new app. We will also be improving service delay and reroute alerts. We're going to be able to have ticket storage on our routes, through our mobile ticketing. real-time display of moving vehicles. And then we will have enhanced capabilities with usage trends and analytics in the new app. So as a preview here of our trip planner, the trip planner is going to allow customers to configure settings based on their own needs and preferences. So you could see here some examples of that would be to indicate how many transfers, the maximum number of transfers you would like to take on your journey, the maximum walking distance to one stop. So we'll be able to filter itineraries based on that. We'll have information, we'll have configurability based on accessibility. So for example, you need completely barrier-free access versus non-barrier-free, and you can choose that. And the itineraries will also filter on that. And then when we display the information, we'll be able to show whether bikes are allowed or not, for example, or whether a service is wheelchair accessible. Other configurability preferences include filtering for transit mode. So you can select, let's say you prefer to have a rail or metro versus a bus, and also points of interest. You can filter on that as well to display on the map. So our trip planner will have various ways to view the information. We will have multimodal travel options and trip quotes. So you could see here an example of taking, a bus to a train to a rail vehicle to another bus, for example, and then how much it would cost and the number of transfers and the time. Point-to-point direction. So let's say you select one of these, and then you'll be able to navigate based on how far you have to walk, where you have to transfer, and so forth. And then we also have a live map option, which will allow you to trace the route as you're traveling along it. So this will help with navigation and knowing where to get on or off your vehicle. And then in terms of mobile ticketing, we will. This is building upon our current application. We will have some enhanced features. You'll be able to purchase tickets and store them for later use. You can recuperate tickets on lost tickets on lost or stolen devices. You can access tickets on multiple devices as tickets are stored in the cloud, and you can also split payments. So these graphics here just show, the step-by-step on how you would actually order a ticket. And then once you purchase the ticket, then you can use the ticket will show up, and then you can also activate a QR code. We aren't using the QR code at this point because we do have visual inspection by our transit fare inspectors, but in the future, if we go through verification, we have the QR code that we can use. And then also you could see a menu here for how you would activate tickets when you have, basically tickets in your wallet. Okay. And so some of the benefits of Muni Mobile, it's completely owned and managed by the SFMTA. So there aren't external links. So there's an all-in-one mobile app, mobile ticketing and trip planner in one. We're going to be able to, in the future, support sustainable transportation modes. And this is the next point is really critical. It will enable two-way communications to strengthen customer relations and enable feedback to the SFMTA. And it will facilitate better planning through analytics. So that wraps up the brief presentation here. We have a link that you can go to here if you would like more information. And as I wrap up here, I would just like to acknowledge our Chief Technology Officer, Lisa Walton, our portfolio manager, Zara Fute in our technology division, as well as the many folks in technology, communications, and transit accessible services and other divisions in the SFMTA who have supported this project. Thank you, Liz.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of these features roll out. We got one quick question from the audience, which is, would we be able to share this presentation with the crowd? Would that be okay with you?
Yes.
Great. We'll make sure to send that out as a follow-up. In addition, a team of very enthusiastic Seamless volunteers has compiled like a short survey and usability study to dive in on the details of some of these. So if you're interested in leaving feedback, we'll have a few avenues to follow up with you at the end of this. And with that, I think we can hand it over to Will Fisher. Excited to hear what you have to share. And thanks again, Jason.
Awesome. Let me, okay. Great, thank you, Liz. Can you see this okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So let me just move this out of the way. All right, so I come to you from New York at the, so the Long Island Railroad, for those who don't know, is part of the MTA. We are the, which obviously is the New York area region, the other MTA. We are the largest commuter railroad in the country. Just to give you some sense of scale, pre-pandemic, we had about 330,000 trips a day. And then, well, yeah. All right, so great. So just today, I'll be talking about different places you can see customer information, and not only where you can see this data, but what we show in these outlets and how we got there. So we had some internal projects where we basically improved the quality of our data, and then that allowed us to make improvements in a number of places. So let me start with the first one is GPS data. So we have about 1,000 cars in the fleet, and actually you're looking at a picture of on every single car we installed antennas that connect to a GPS device, so we can get information about speed and well, obviously location, but also speed and heading and what have you, from every car in the fleet, and that comes every few seconds. So we have kind of this deluge of data, and this allowed us to actually show you exactly where your train is. And one of the reasons presenting this is I think part of the solution is part of the solution is definitely having really good quality data, but then another part is processing it into something very actionable and useful for customers, and then displaying it in a very kind of easy to digest way. So you're looking at our app actually, and this would be, I'm going to play a video for you, but this would be what the experience for a customer would be like. So let me click that. So you can actually see the train approaching the station on the bottom right, which is Woodside. And if you zoom in, you'll actually see all the cars. It's not super necessary, but I want to show that because the location is so real time that you'll see it's crossing the front of the platform right there, or it was. And basically, if you were looking at the map and you were standing there, those would happen at exactly the same time, right? So it's very up to date, very reliable, and we kind of want to engender trust with our users that way. We also show this on station signage. So as you can see, it says 20 minutes. So the ETA is updated from GPS updates. So in the past, it was signal system, and that would only update every few minutes. But with GPS, we can kind of make sure that ETA is always up to date. So the next project that we did, for which we got a little more press actually, is crowding information. So real-time crowding. And we do this in one of three ways. So the first is we actually weigh the train. So the trains have airbags on the trucks, and we can determine the pressure of those airbags, and you can weigh the payload of the train, which is basically the passengers on the train, and determine how many passengers there are. So this turns out to be the most accurate method. We also have traditional APCs, which are found more on buses, which basically are infrared sensors above the doors that show people coming in and out. That is another method, slightly less accurate. And then the third, also less accurate than that, is security camera footage, which we already had security cameras in the trains, on the cars, and we just, repurposed it, or, gave it a new purpose as well, to get customer information out of it. So in none of these cases did we have to install new hardware, which was nice. We did have to go to the car manufacturer, which was Bombardier, and have them do some changes, but luckily there was actually no hardware that we needed. We were able to get this data. So what can we do with that data? Well, we show this in our app. Here is the app for a train that hasn't even pulled up to the platform yet, but it shows you where it's going to pull up. And obviously you can see that from the diagram that green, yellow, red, more space, some space, less space. And you can use this to determine, once you're on the platform and have decided on the train that you're going to take, where along the train you're, you want to be, where along the platform will say that you want to be, in order to in some cases, do social distancing during COVID, or if it's not COVID, just find a seat, right? These are both important. So this is actually in real time, and that data comes through every 10 seconds. But there's another use case that's related, which is trip planning. And trip planning is kind of like, obviously trip planning is deciding what train you're going to take. And let me go to the next slide and kind of just show you what I'm talking about. So traditionally we think of trip planning as, maybe the night before you're deciding what train you're going to take tomorrow. So obviously we used to do this, but a lot of people actually do this more because the travel patterns have changed so much. Or sorry, the patterns do change in real time, right? So, in the past, the service would change once every 3 or 6 months with a schedule, and even then very slightly. During COVID, based on different waves of COVID and what have you, and how many people are going in and out, we actually can't, we change the schedule much more often. So we actually finding that people use this a lot. So, during trip planning, or maybe if you haven't been in the system in a while, you want to decide which train you want to take, not just which car you want to be in once you have your train, but which train you want to take. And this would show you, let's say you're in New Hyde Park and you're going to take a train tomorrow morning. You have a few options, and obviously if you pick the first, it's going to be more crowded than the third based on the number of people on that sign. And again, we're using that data from the last few days to show you kind of what we think it's going to be tomorrow, and that tends to be quite accurate, and people like that too. We show this on our signs, so you can see this here, and our philosophy is kind of, once you get to a station, you shouldn't have to use the app. If a sign is there and is always displaying the information you want, I think that's more convenient than even the best designed app, because you have to pull out your phone, unlock it, find your app, and then find the screen within the app, whereas this dedicated sign is just showing you generally what you want. So we try to put as much as we can on the signs. So this is one case of that. But we can actually do even better than this. We can, we know where the signs are on the platform, right? The signs, they don't move. So we can actually make this decision even easier for you by telling you where you are standing as you look at the sign, so that you don't have to do any mental math to determine, okay, well, that's great. The first half is in this case, it's all green, but let's say the first half is red and the last isn't, I guess I'll, broadly speaking, walk back, but I don't really know where it switches. We can show you exactly where you are right now with respect to the incoming train. So the train's not there yet, to be clear. The train is coming, but this is where you're going to be with respect to that train, and the car that's going to pull up, in this case right next to you, is a little more crowded than the others. So with this, you can determine if you want to move. But again, the idea being, get the data, process it, make it super easy for customers to make their decision, right? Don't have them do the computation or the math, you do it for them. I just want to talk very briefly about some signage updates we made. These are the same size sign. This is not, a magic trick. this is the same size, image on your display, right? But if I asked you on the left, what track is the first train on? I think most people would have a hard time not figuring it out, but looking, right? You have to look pretty closely. On the right, it's immediately obvious. So again, we kind of structure the information around what customers wanted, and I think we did a much better job with the screen real estate here. We have another design where we kind of turn something from text into something much more visual, and you can see how the connections connect with the like the green Oyster Bay train connects with the main train that we're displaying here. So what has been the customer feedback? Well, at a quantitative level, we have, you can just look at our App Store ratings, and we're doing quite well, and we're very happy with this result. So, I think this speaks for itself. We also get really good qualitative feedback. So, we might have our super users who, for whom we're meeting a customer need because they really want to dig into all the data and all the tools and whatever. But then you also get people kind of somewhere in the middle who use an app but maybe aren't obsessed with it, and they'll say, "Oh, I was really surprised. I wasn't expecting this, and this is really great." So when we hear that, I think I'm happy to see that we've hit a nerve in a positive way. Here's some more feedback. So what's next is actually for us to do basically Metro North, which is about equivalent size, the other commuter railroad of the MTA, and combine ticketing, which is the app on the right, and put this all into one app. And I'm showing you a preview of the app icon, possibly not final, but that's something that customers ask about, is kind of reducing the number of apps, at least for experiences that are similar. And then the last item, which maybe I'll talk about in the Q&A if someone has questions, is we're going even more contextual, or we're making it even easier for customers, and we're taking that crowding data and not just putting it on a sign, but literally putting it on an LED strip on the platform. So if you see a green segment before the train pulls in, right, the train won't be there yet. You see a green segment, that means that the car that is going to pull up by that segment of strip is going to be empty, so you can get a seat there. So again, just make it super, super easy for people to kind of understand this data and make it actionable. And that's all I got.
Thanks so much, Will. Really cool to see the creative kind of iterations and really making the most out of the flexibility of the digital signage. And also interesting to hear about how you are dealing with a similar ecosystem. So I think that will be interesting to dive into in the Q&A, because I think in the Bay Area, we're dealing with similar fragmentation. So yes, thanks again for your presentation. Next up is David.
Hey, wow, that's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. And there's my screen. Hi, everyone. My name's Dave Maltson, and thanks so much to Seamless Bay Area for inviting me. It's really exciting to be part of this conversation. Some really cool people. I'll just start by just giving a quick rundown of some stuff that I've been lucky enough to be a part of in the area of transit rider information. My first job in the transit industry was with IBI Group. Was part of the team that built the transit real-time data platform and the transit alerts product for creating passenger alerts. I did a master's degree at MIT where I built an app to test headway-based bus dispatching strategies with the MBTA, conducted some experiments with that. I worked at the MBTA for several years. I was a project manager for the Rapid Transit Real-Time project that Liz mentioned earlier. That was really a revamp of the software that powered our passenger predictions data for the subway mode, and also the digital signage in the stations. And now I've moved to the Bay Area, and I work at a company called Swiftly, which is a big data platform for public transit. I'm a product manager there, responsible for data integration, onboarding, and the data management for our 100 plus customers. So I wanted to I kind of organized my presentation, just briefly touch on 3 areas that I think are really key to creating great rider experiences. And I'm going to draw from various examples from the different experiences that I mentioned before. So I'm going to talk about product management principles that I think are really important, including metrics and the user perspective. And then the need for a really close integration between operations and customer communications. And finally, just touch on data standardization. So first, product management as a discipline is something I really first learned about while working at the MBTA, although it wasn't really my job title until I came out here to the Bay Area. I did really try to bring some of those principles to my work on the Rapid Transit Real-Time project. So I just think one of the really important things here is metrics, and picking the right metrics that are going to help you, set goals, measure your success, quickly identify problem areas, and just keep your team really motivated. So we started off as a team. We had, I think, 3 developers when we started, plus myself. And we started by just saying, well, we got to measure what we're doing. So we built a prediction accuracy measurement tool. And that really allowed us to nail down, well, what times of day, what stations are really seeing the worst performance. And over, I think, about a year of time that we were working on this project, we improved the accuracy from 65% to 77%. And yeah, as far as I know, it continues to improve to this day. So metrics also comes into play in another area that I wasn't directly involved in, but my colleagues at the MBTA, they actually put together an RFP. I believe it was the first time that a transit agency had run an RFP on the basis of prediction accuracy. That wasn't the only metric, but it was a metric that they worked with IBI. This is kind of a slide where my previous, current, and future employers all come into one, because IBI sort of coordinated this what they call a bake-off, where each vendor ran on the live production data, and they read in the predictions, compared them to the actual arrival times of all the buses. And ultimately, Swiftly was the winner of that. And I've got some links here about that. But that's just another just important use of metrics for determining which vendor to go with in this case. So prediction accuracy as a metric is a really great way of centering the user experience of a transit rider. So that's kind of my next principle here is the user experience. And we saw Will, kind of really narrowing in on that at LIRR. So one of the things, the kind of case here is a lot of subway systems here in North America have a kind of legacy software running the signaling system, and especially running the predictions. And so it becomes often very, very difficult or even impossible to produce accurate predictions at all stations during certain types of disruptions, like a bus bridge, maybe a single tracking situation. And so what originally happened when they rolled out the original system was they kind of said, well, it's a legacy system. What are you going to do? We'll just shut the signs off at those stations where predictions are inaccurate. And you can see, we used to get a flurry of tweets whenever this would happen. It was pretty demoralizing, to be honest, when you work on this project. But really, what we the lesson that we took away, and I'll just go to the next slide, the lessons we took away here are, yeah, this is a new feature, right? It's easy to say, for 100 years, MBTA riders had no predictions, and now they're complaining because they don't have them for 10 minutes during a disruption. But the truth is, a feature like this is a must-have. Just because you didn't have it last year, we need to really be producing this information at all times. And in fact, during a disruption is precisely the time when this information is needed the most. And so we came up with a couple of solutions to really allow us to. We basically decided that our fundamental principle was going to be give people some kind of information all the time. So there were times when predictability was poor, but the service pattern was really well known. And so we would use what we call headway mode, where instead of saying, an ALF train is coming in 7 minutes, we would say trains to ALF every 5 to 8 minutes, because that was the most that we knew. And then when things were really crazy and we just had no idea, or we had no ability to produce a prediction, we actually built a UI that the dispatchers could use, or actually the public information officer could use. So you can see here an example, maybe single tracking, board on opposite side. But you might say something like station closed. And you can really do a lot with, I think it was 40 characters on these signs, but just giving people the ability to put information on the best most useful information that they could was a big win for the riders. And so that kind of brings me to my next principle here, which is close integration with operations staff. So the people who were controlling the signs, same people running the Twitter account, they're called public information officers, and they sit right in the control center, right, with all these subway dispatchers, and the bus dispatchers are right downstairs from them. That is just so important because it enables them to get information out to the passengers really, really quickly, and also enables information to get from the passengers to the control center really quickly. If the air conditioning is broken on a car and you're in Boston, I'll give you some advice, just tweet about it. You'll see somebody come and fix it, sometimes, within a few stops. It can really, I've actually seen a lot of really pleasantly surprised tweets. And then just another piece of the puzzle here in terms of integrating operations and communications, is this on the software side. And so right now at Swiftly, we have a product called Service Adjustments. It allows changes like detours, stop closures, trip cancellations to be made inside of the operations facing software that the dispatchers are using. And all those changes actually flow through to the real-time passenger information that we're providing. And there are even some newer formats, they're very experimental right now, but GTFS service changes is kind of an experimental format that if it were to be built out by different vendors and agencies, there's a lot of potential to allow even interoperability between different vendors in this area. And I'll just wrap up by saying on the interoperability note, it's such a huge piece of the puzzle is data standardization, because if we all can kind of get on the same page, use the same data formats, then really an agency can procure the best software, the best hardware in various different categories like predictions, digital signage, dispatch, and everything can kind of work together. In particular, when you look at rider apps, we see the transit app, Google Maps, Apple Maps, and those are really great UX, and they're working in every city because we and other vendors are producing GTFS real time. So that's what I've got. Thank you, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Dave. Really cool to see behind the scenes, the operations center, and a different perspective to the other presenters as well. So really appreciate your presentation today. So with that, we can dive into the panel presentations. And I will start with a question for Jason, which is, once the NGCIS, the customer information system, rolls out, what is next? What's your vision for the system in like 5 years' time?
Sorry. We're working toward, as I mentioned during the presentation, towards the end of this year, just to get the system up and running. We have a lot of cool features that we're really focused on. I think Dave really touched upon some of the exciting features, such as real-time service changes. He mentioned the GTFS service changes that's coming online. That will help us really be able to respond when there is a service disruption. That's something that we've been really concerned about. And also improving terminal departures. We know that's a big issue near our terminals right now. Things aren't that reliable in terms of predictions. But I think really, from a big picture standpoint, we really want people to depend on real-time information and just to be more confident in their system. I mentioned that when we had done our research back in 2017, we found that real-time information really had the power to change people's behavior. So if we get to the point where we're actually doing that, where let's say we have a service disruption, but we can direct someone to an alternative, that's a huge victory, rather than just telling people actually shaping behavior, much in the same way that we've seen innovations in other sectors of the transportation world in recent years.
Thank you, Jason. So I'll go to Will for our next question. So it's interesting that the Long Island Railroad is working under the umbrella of the MTA, which is a big and complex organization. So for your work, did you need to ask permission to roll out your innovations? And how did you try and work quickly within the context of the large organization?
That's a perhaps a fraught question, but we asked for forgiveness, not for permission, and we got a lot done, and I'll speak for the MTA at least. I would imagine other transit agencies are in a similar boat, that it could kind of have a somewhat conservative bent around not biasing towards action. So in a situation like that, sometimes you do have to break the rules. Although the rules in many cases are kind of implicit, no one really can point to a rule. It's a bit more about culture. But if you break the rules and you do something really, you do it well, as in our case, I think in our case, then I don't think it's bad. In fact, like I was saying in the presentation, now we're doing the other railroad, right? So they the executives or the powers that be could see that the people were really, really happy with this, and that ultimately is what matters. So then you kind of get the green light to expand that work. So generally speaking, I would advise asking for forgiveness, but as much risk as I personally want to take.
Makes sense. It sounds like elevating customer voices can be really persuasive as well. Thank you, Will. So next question is for Dave. It's unusual to see an in-house team at a transit agency working on something like a real-time arrivals system. Typically, this is done by outside vendors or contractors. So what was the experience like of working with an in-house team within a transit agency?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was great. I mean, I think it was really nice to be able to work to work at the agency, where we had kind of an interesting setup where a lot of folks were sort of technically contractors, and it was sort of there was somewhat of a outsider kind of feeling at times, which I think can hurt a little bit when you're trying to go in and talk to dispatchers and your kind of sysadmins and stuff. But I think ultimately it does enable you to kind of people feel a little more comfortable working with you, and I think just having that knowledge of the system is really helpful. So yeah, I mean, I think we also worked with plenty of great vendors too, and it's just a matter of there's almost there's a spectrum from you've got your employees, and you've got some contractors who are kind of always on site all the time, and then you've got vendors who maybe have other clients, and they all add a different piece of the puzzle, because same time you've got a vendor who maybe has 10 other agencies that they're working with. They're gonna have a lot of knowledge that they can bring to you as well. So it's nice. It's good to have kind of a mix of that stuff going on.
That makes sense. So through the mix of the old hands and the deep experience that agency employees would have, when you combine that with kind of outside expertise, people who've worked on other projects in other places, you get a nice alchemy there to deliver really great stuff.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we have an audience question for Jason. Somebody asked, why is Muni developing its own app with reference to transit app or Google Maps?
That's a great question. Want to make sure I clarify here. When we say we're developing our own app, we're actually working with a vendor to develop the app. So it's not actually in-house staff that's doing the app. We also went through a procurement process to select that vendor. It's actually the same vendor. It's a subcontractor to our prime contractor. That subcontractor is actually the same vendor that is doing BART's app as well. It is also, the SFMT will also provide GTFS real-time information feed, as well as GTFS static feed to all third parties. So Transit App or Swift, Route or Google Maps are all able to access our data.
That makes sense. So it's not necessarily like one or the other, it's all of the above.
Exactly.
Is there anything that your team that you want to go above and beyond what the third-party apps are able to deliver?
Yeah, so we've been focused a lot on those the real-time service changes. And that's actually, it sounds very simple to do, but it's actually a very complex problem, or very complex challenge rather, to be able to, for example, designate new routes on the fly when we have to do a service change or there's a service disruption and we have to do a bus substitution. Our current standards don't really support that. Third parties, it's all based on a standard that the third parties intake the information. So we're working really to coordinate and to make sure that the systems that provide information to our prediction system, we have tight integration there, and that gives us a huge advantage in actually being able to show the information that our customers need.
That makes sense. So you're able to provide a deeper level of information than the standard data feeds is kind of able
Correct.
to offer.
Yeah. And also I would add timeliness as well, because sometimes like Google Maps, you take a couple of days to process a GTFS static feed.
Right. That's a while. Yeah. When that's not very useful if you have a service disruption to not know about it until 2 days later. So that's fascinating. It's great to know. So looking through my list of audience questions. So this is one for the whole group, and anybody can take it, which is, what factors influence a transit agency's likelihood to prioritize customer information and to innovate? And what gets in the way of innovation?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I can take a stab at it. I think I felt very lucky to be working at the MBTA. I think, we had executives who were ready to kind of, and a board actually that was ready to kind of empower, technology and kind of hire a bunch of people to really just, I think it was a risk for them, right? Like they were kind of ready to take a risk and say, let's create a new department. It was called Customer Technology Department, and hire a bunch of people and kind of give them this charter of like, how can we improve the customer experience using technology? I mean, when I think about it now, I mean, I've never had to be on the board of anything, but it must have been actually quite a risk because there's a fair amount of budget that they're allocating to this thing and they don't know if it's going to work or not. But I think we were really lucky with that.
Having support from the top of the organization is really important. That's something we do at Seamless. We encourage our audience to tune into board meetings and make your voices heard. So if you want to see great experiences, we recommend you sign up to volunteer, and we'll put you in touch with opportunities to give your feedback to the boards directly.
And I would say on our end, we've had tremendous executive leadership really emphasizing the importance of real-time information. Even during the beginning of the pandemic, when there was a lot of stuff in flux, that's when our executive leadership really pushed and said, this is precisely the time that we needed real-time information. So we're very thankful for that. I think the question about getting in the way of innovation, I think one of the challenges is that we have a lot of legacy systems. We think about our prediction system as a unit, but it actually has to integrate with many other systems, like our ATCS system, which is since the 90s. We've got our ORBCAT system, which is now close to 10 years old. So things are moving at different timelines, and that adds to the challenge of integration between systems.
Because you're kind of maintaining things that already exist and figuring out how to jerry-rig things together.
Exactly.
Yeah. Those were great answers. So another audience question is, has any professional group evaluated all of the digital signage systems for transit agencies around the world and created a top 10, like a top list of the best digital systems? That's a really great question.
Not aware of any.
I would love to see that listicle, BuzzFeed, like top 10 customer information systems. That would be the most deeply wonky, but I think everybody in the audience would love that as a list. So
I think LIR would be pretty high up there with those colored LED lights. That was really cool.
yeah. Yeah, I guess this is a good segue. A question we had was if you could steal customer innovations from other agencies around the world and just like magically drop them into your system, what would you pick?
Yeah, so one of the things, one innovation that I saw when I happened to be in Europe was when I was riding a bus, and when there was an onboard sign, and when the bus was approaching the transit center, all the routes and their departure times were displayed on the vehicle. I thought that was really cool, and that's something that we are pursuing in our new system.
I think to that point, something around kind of just having good screen real estate on your vehicle, on your vehicles, the bus shelters, wherever. I mean, Jason was presenting something where you could see the bus on a map, and seeing the bus on a map is, or seeing a train on a map is, on the one hand, it's a, for some people, maybe it's a little too much data, and it's like kind of flashy, but they might not use it. But on the other hand, it comes into play when people don't necessarily trust the predictions. And the predictions are really hard to do in the first place. So if you just show them where it is, people have this intuitive sense, especially if they, take the same stop or they go into the same train stop, they just start to know where they need to, when they need to get out of their car. So if they're looking at our app, for example, they'll just look at the train, and it's like, I didn't have to tell anyone. They can figure it out on their own because I've now given them the data. So seeing Jason's screen, or just having more screen real estate to do stuff like that, I think is awesome. And for example, in New York, I'd love to see, let's say, see the bus on a map, right? Because I stand waiting for the bus. Unfortunately, those ETAs, are, sometimes it's near the terminal and the bus hasn't left yet. So that's really hard to get that number right. I guess a bus on a map wouldn't help too much. In that case, it's at the terminal. But just in general, seeing it on a map, that can give you a ton. But you need those screens, right? Because it's kind of annoying to pull up your phone. Do you trust the phone? But if it's on a screen there and it's right, that can be a magical experience.
So the common thread there is more screens.
Actually, the terminal dispatching question comes up so often. Like, you talk to anyone who sort of works in this area, and it's like, it's the worst. There's a train or there's a bus that's sitting at the terminal. So I guess I would say one thing, and maybe to connect it back to like the concept of like connecting between operations and your predictions is like so critical, because a lot of times if you're on like a heavy rail subway, it drives you nuts. You'd be like, somebody knows when this train is going to leave, right? So why doesn't the system that makes the predictions know? And it's turns out there's a lot of organizational barriers and technical difficulties and stuff. But I would love to, if I could just snap my fingers and make it so that the system that tells that driver when they should go and monitors their performance is the same system that provides predictions to passengers. So I think that'd be amazing. It's the kind of thing, definitely something we're all kind of working towards here. I think we've all mentioned it, but I don't think anyone's really nailed it down yet.
Yeah, to David's point, that's one of the things that we're working on at the SFMT, really linking up our CAT ADL system, computer aided dispatch automatic vehicle location system, and what it tells the driver, especially in terms of like both schedule mode and headway mode, and coordinating that with the predictions that we show. So it's all in one.
Very exciting. Okay, so we are a little bit past time. Thank you all for hanging out with us tonight. I think it's been like a really fascinating conversation to see like behind the scenes. And I will end with a huge thank you to our panelists today, Jason, Will, and Dave. And a reminder that we will be following up with the opportunity to share feedback. So you can expect that in your email tomorrow morning. And we'll also package up the presentation. So with that, that's all we have for you tonight. Thank you all so much for joining, and really appreciate your time, and hope this has been inspiring and a good way to connect everybody. That is, after all, what we're about.